If you ever listened to great bebop soloists and wanted to know how they played those beautiful, long streams of ideas, this video is for you. We're going to demystify that sound and show you how to build bebop lines just like this. If you're serious about internalizing these concepts, make sure to check out my Patreon below, where you can find all the lesson materials, including every example, as well as bonus etudes. Okay, so in order to truly understand and create great bebop style lines, we first need to understand the big picture concept of Lego bebop. This simple and powerful term was taught me by one of my mentors, Randy Napoleon. The core idea is that you don't just magically play long, beautiful lines out of nowhere. You build them from small, simple, stackable pieces or Legos, just like I did in that previous line. Now, let's dive into the two core bebop concepts that will help us create our musical Legos. The first core secret to playing Lego bebop ideas is to ensure that your chord tones consistently land on downbeats. The tool we use for that? The bebop scale. It's simply a mixolydian scale with an added natural 7, which creates an 8-note scale. This naturally places every chord tone on a downbeat of the chord that we're playing over. For today, we are going to be using this position starting on the root of the scale, but you can also find a list of all the positions over on my Patreon. Now let's start creating some bebop lines. Our first blueprint for bebop is simple. It's going to be up arpeggio, then down scale. Check out this line right here. The bebop scale has 4 different arpeggios we can use in conjunction with it. To find these, we simply stack thirds off of every chord tone of our C7 chord. So for example, if we stacked 3 thirds from the root, we would get, of course, C7. But if we did it from the third, we would then get an E minor 7 flat 5. And if we did it from the fifth, we would get a G minor 7. And from the flat 7, we would get a B flat major 7. These arpeggios can then move into another musical Lego, which consists of moving linearly through the bebop scale from one chord tone to another. In our first example, we went up this C7 arpeggio and then moved linearly from C down to C an octave below using the bebop scale. We could, of course, use these Legos or blueprints to create more lines by starting on different chord tones of our bebop scale and moving then up arpeggio and then going chord tone to chord tone. For example, here's what it sounds like off the third. By adding our simple blueprint of up arpeggio down scale off of each chord tone, you can create 4 different lines like you just saw. Also realize that every time you land on a chord tone on a downbeat, you could use it as a launching point to stack another Lego bebop idea onto your line. Thinking this way gives you a powerful and consistent system for building your own long, beautiful bebop lines. Now that we have our 2 core building blocks, we need to find ways to lead into them and to embellish them. The secret? Enclosures. Listen to how this phrase uses enclosures to smoothly lead into our linear chord tone to chord tone run. For an in-depth lesson on enclosures, click the video in the corner of the screen. But for today's lesson, enclosures are just chromatic notes that pull us to a target tone that usually lands on a downbeat. There are 2 main types of common enclosures. To demonstrate, we could use a 2-note enclosure starting on downbeat to lead into a simple chord tone to chord tone run. Or Or we could use a 3-note enclosure starting on an upbeat to do the exact same thing. They're the perfect way to lead into our Lego bebop ideas. Now, you don't always have to enclose the first note of the phrase. For example, in this idea, we're using a 2-note enclosure to enclose our top note of this arpeggio, then descend down the bebop scale, enclosing to this C, and then down the bebop scale. Remember, if you create a pattern like this, it's a Lego that you can then link to other Legos via chord tones and downbeats, or treat it as a pattern that you could start on different chord tones of our dominant chord. Let's look at another example of using enclosures. Notice here I'm walking up the arpeggio from the root, then I enclose the third being E. Which, as you can hear, lands on an upbeat. Since we are enclosing a note that lands on an upbeat, we would use a 3-note enclosure. And then finally descend down the bebop scale from our chord tone. And of course, we could take it through our chord tones. Here's a final phrase that links everything together. Notice here we enclose to a chord tone to start off our line, then walk up the bebop scale, looking for chord tones on downbeats as springboards to other Legos. Here I stop on the flat 7th and launch into a B flat major 7 arpeggio, then enclosing to the top note just like we did in our Lego fragments. Then I walk down the bebop scale again, looking for chord tones as launching points into other Legos. I finally land on the third, being E, and use our up arpeggio, down scale Lego fragment from earlier. Alright, now let's talk about harmonic applications of all your Lego bebop lines. The thing that you must understand is that in bebop we often use harmonic generalization. This just means that we don't necessarily have to play a new idea for every single chord in a progression. For example, in a 2-5-1 progression, instead of playing off each individual chord, we would only play off of the 5-7 chord in that 2-5-1. This means that our C7 bebop ideas would work not only just over the 5-7 chord, but over the 2 chord and the 1 chord. Knowing this gives us amazing amounts of freedom when creating lines, as we only have to think about the 5-7 chord over these type of progressions. Now, where things get really interesting is how bebop players would use these bebop lines to convey other types of sounds. For example, if bebop players wanted to create a more altered type of sound over the 5-7 chord, they would simply just play their bebop ideas off the tritone substitution of that 5 chord. This adds a beautiful sense of tension and release that just playing the bebop scale won't necessarily get you. Also, bebop players would use these bebop sounds over minor 2-5-1s as well. To do this, they would think of the 2 chord being a half diminished chord, or minor 7 flat 5, as the related dominant. So remember our various arpeggios off the chord tones of a C7. One of them is a half diminished chord, E minor 7 flat 5, the arpeggio off the third. So then if you had the progression E minor 7 flat 5, A 7 flat 9, and D minor 6, you would play C7 bebop ideas then over the E half diminished. essentially playing C7, A7, D minor 7, like this. For some great Lego bebop fragments and patterns that you can use over this type of progression, make sure to check out my lesson materials over on Patreon. So as you can see, thinking in terms of musical Legos or Lego bebop, focusing on chord tones and downbeats, as well as understanding the two core principles of bebop, being the bebop scale and arpeggios, gives us an easy to follow formula that can help us create hundreds of lines. Again, if you're serious about internalizing this concept, I would encourage you to go over on Patreon and download all my lesson materials, along with the bonus etude that shows you how to put these concepts into practice. And speaking of Patreons, I want to give a shout out to those Patreons. Without you guys, none of this is possible, and I truly appreciate your support. Thank you. All right, that's it for this lesson. And until the next one, thank you for watching, and remember to always keep swinging.